The courtroom was tense, every corner of it heavy with a quiet anticipation. The judge, Judge Thompson, sat at the bench, his cold, calculating eyes focused on the papers in front of him. Marcellus stood at the edge of the defendant's table, his hands trembling ever so slightly. It was only his second trial, but it felt like 100. The charges against him were grave, wrongful accusations of grand theft. Yet deep down, he knew the truth. He wasn't guilty, not in the slightest. His fight for justice had begun the moment he had been wrongfully dragged into this case. As he looked up at Judge Thompson, Marcellus could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The judge was an older man with a reputation for being tough, quick, decisive, and often too quick to pass judgment. Thompson had seen countless cases like his, and Marcellus could feel the judge already dismissing him, already thinking he was just another statistic, another young man in trouble. "This should be a quick one," Judge Thompson muttered dismissively, his voice flat. His eyes barely lifted from the case file in front of him as he turned toward the prosecutor. Marcellus clenched his fists beneath the table. His palms were slick with sweat, but he would not back down. This was his chance to prove his innocence, and nothing would make him crumble. He stood tall, his spine straight, and his voice steady as he addressed the court. "Your Honor, I didn't steal anything." Judge Thompson barely looked up from his papers. "Another one of these?" he muttered under his breath. Then, turning to the prosecutor, he gestured to hurry things along. It was clear to Marcellus, this wasn't about justice. It was about getting through the day's docket, closing cases and moving on. Marcellus wasn't going to let him dismiss him so easily. The prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, stood up with his sharp suit and impeccable confidence. Carrington was a seasoned professional. He had handled cases like this 1,000 times before. His words flowed with practiced ease as he laid out the evidence against Marcellus. The defendant, Marcellus Westbrook, was caught near the scene of a car theft. His fingerprints were found inside the vehicle. He attempted to flee when law enforcement apprehended him. The evidence is clear. Carrington's tone was unwavering, and it made Marcellus's stomach twist. The courtroom murmured, and Marcellus's heart sank. He knew how these cases went. Everything pointed to him, and in a system like this, it was almost impossible to prove innocence once the gears of the system started turning. He was just another black man in a city full of suspicion, and his word meant nothing against the weight of what Carrington was presenting. But there was one thing they didn't know. Marcellus had been preparing for this moment his whole life. His mother, a public defender for over 20 years, had raised him with a deep understanding of the law. While other kids played sports or video games, he had spent hours reading case law, studying criminal procedure, and learning how to argue. He'd watched her fight and win for people who had been forgotten by the system, and he had learned from her strength. The judge turned to him. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Marcellus stood tall, feeling the weight of the eyes in the room on him. They were all waiting for him to break, to fumble under pressure. But he wasn't going to. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about everyone who had been wrongfully accused, about everyone who had been shut out by a broken system. "Your Honor, I want to represent myself." The words left his mouth before he could stop them. The room fell silent. The judge blinked, clearly surprised by the request. "Excuse me? I want to represent myself," Marcellus repeated, more firmly this time. His heart raced, but his voice was steady. Judge Thompson stared at him for a long moment, his lips pressed together. Then, without hesitation, he sighed. "This should be fun." "Fine. Represent yourself. Let's see what you've got." Marcellus wasn't sure if he had made the right decision, but there was no turning back now. He had to fight for his future. He had to show the court that he was more than just another case. He was a person who had been wronged, and he would not let the system trample him. The courtroom was silent as Marcellus stood at the defense table. Extremely worried, the weight of the moment wasn't lost on him. This wasn't just about defending himself against these charges. It was about something bigger, about exposing the cracks in a system that too often trampled over the innocent. He started his defense calmly. "Your Honor, I'd like to challenge the validity of the evidence presented by the prosecution." The prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, didn't flinch. He had seen young defendants stumble under pressure countless times, and he knew this wouldn't be any different. But Marcellus wasn't just speaking to the judge. He was speaking to everyone in the room. He knew he had to plant seeds of doubt in their minds. Officer Ruiz's testimony doesn't hold water. Marcellus's voice rang through the courtroom. He claimed to have seen me in the stolen vehicle, but according to his GPS logs, he wasn't even in the area when the crime was committed. The prosecutor's face faltered for the first time. A murmur spread across the room, and Judge Thompson turned his attention to Marcellus. The judge's eyes narrowed. This was getting interesting. Your Honor, I'd like to request Officer Ruiz's GPS logs be submitted as evidence. Marcellus continued, his tone unwavering. The prosecutor hesitated, his brow furrowing. Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant. But Judge Thompson was already considering it. Marcellus had made his first move, and the judge was paying attention now. Let's verify the logs, Judge Thompson said, his voice softer now, curious. The prosecutor fumbled. Your Honor, I don't think that's necessary. The officer's testimony is clear. Marcellus took a step forward, speaking directly to the judge. The truth is, Your Honor, Officer Ruiz was not where he claimed to be. I wasn't even near the car when it was stolen. If we look at the GPS logs, it will prove that. The room went quiet. For the first time, the case was not as clear-cut as it had seemed. The judge nodded slowly, gesturing for the prosecutor to respond. We'll review the logs. It was a victory, but it was just the beginning. Days passed, and the tension in the air was palpable. Marcellus had not only presented an argument, he had unraveled the prosecutor's case. The days were long and the odds were against him, but he had the truth, and truth had a way of rising to the surface. Just when it seemed like the tide had turned, something unexpected happened. As Marcellus walked out of the courthouse that evening, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of him, its headlights blinding him momentarily. The door swung open, and Agent Carter stepped out. Marcellus's heart skipped a beat. He had seen Carter around. He knew the agent was someone powerful, someone connected, but he never thought they would cross paths like this. Marcellus, we need to talk. Carter's voice was urgent, his steps quick as he moved toward him. What is this? Marcellus asked, still reeling from everything that had happened in court. What do you want from me? It's not about what I want. It's about what we both want. Carter's eyes were sharp, his voice low. The system you're fighting isn't just a broken courthouse. It's the whole damn system. And you're not alone in this anymore. Marcellus was confused. Who are you working for? I'm working for the truth, Carter said, his gaze unwavering. And so are you. We need to take them down. Every last one of them. Marcellus felt something shift within him. This wasn't just about him anymore. This wasn't just about his name being cleared. This was bigger. The final day of the trial arrived. The air was thick with tension. The prosecutor, Mitchell Carrington, had put on his best performance, but now Marcellus had the upper hand. With the support of Agent Carter and his allies, he had the evidence, the witnesses, and the truth on his side. The prosecution's case isn't about truth, Your Honor. It's about assumptions. Marcellus's voice was strong as he addressed the judge. But assumptions are not enough to convict a man. Not in this court. Carrington stood, fuming. He tried to argue back, but Marcellus had already won the room. The jury was on his side. The judge was no longer dismissive. The balance of power had shifted. I'm done, Your Honor. The prosecutor muttered, his face flushed. There's nothing left to say. The judge's gavel hit the desk. Case dismissed. Marcellus stood still, his chest swelling with pride and relief. It wasn't over yet, but it felt like a victory. The courtroom erupted in chaos, but Marcellus didn't celebrate. He didn't need to. He had achieved what they thought was impossible. Weeks later, Marcellus found himself standing before a crowd of reporters and community leaders. His victory had turned into a movement, not just for him, but for every person who had been wronged by a broken system. The truth doesn't belong to just a few, Marcellus said, his voice unwavering. It belongs to everyone, and I'm here to make sure we all get it. But as he spoke, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Agent Carter. You think you've won? The real fight is just beginning. Marcellus took a deep breath. He knew the truth now. The battle would never be over. The fight for justice would never end. But he was ready. He had made the system blink, and he wasn't stopping now.